Welcome back, McFly subscribers. Today we will be tying the Royal PMX, a very effective fly, but quite complicated to tie. However, I hope this tutorial will give you all the confidence you need to try this fly. Now I will discuss this fly in more depth further in the video, since I'm sure you all want to get started tying now. But in case you haven't seen this channel before, this is McFly Angler.
Starts now.
Okay, let's get started tying. Place the hook securely in your vise. For a hook, I'm using Risen's 9231 in size 12. What you want in a hook is something with a long shank to give you room to tie this fly. And this hook here is a 2x long shank, perfect for this fly. Now you might ask, why are we using a nymph hook for a dry fly? Well, this fly is very buoyant with that deer hair and hackle. So a heavyweight hook like these nymph hooks will help keep this sitting upright on top of the water and also give you the ability to pull a bit harder on those big fish that will eat this without fear of bending your hook. We also need some thread, and I'm using Viva's 6/0 in brown. Start your thread a hook eye or two length back from the eye of the hook, and then snip or snap off the waist. Now we will build a bit of an underbody with the thread to give it a place for the parachute post to rest on. So let's go all the way up to the hook eye, and then back down about halfway down the hook shank, and then come back up halfway between your thread wraps, which will position us perfectly for the parachute post. For the post, I'm using Polypro yarn. Pull off a turn of this and snip it off the card, and you will be able to tie 2 of these flies with this much. Place the yarn on top of the hook shank, and I make one wrap over the bend in the yarn like so, and then I cross it over the other way, forming an X over the yarn, and then bind down very tight. Now tying that X will help keep this from spinning. I make many more wraps, maybe 4 to 5 in each direction, and then to stiffen the post and keep it from spinning, I've got a little trick. Get yourself some super glue and just put a dot on the yarn. Now gather the 2 halves upward and start posting up the yarn. You do this by spinning your thread around the post many times. Once you get an even base, then stop, as we do not need to go all the way up just yet. Now you can see that this is sitting directly on top, but let's pull it forward slightly. Now we need some deer hair to form the tail, and you can use any deer hair, and this natural purpose mule deer will work just fine. We do not need much. Cut about 1.5 dozen fibers off the swatch. Then pinch the tips of the fibers and pull out the underfur, and you can achieve this with your fingers on a piece this small. Now we need to align the tips, so place the tips down in your stacker, and give the stacker a few good taps on your table. Then pull the fibers out with your left hand. Now I need to mention, I cut a good chunk of my thumb off with a mandolin slicer a couple days before filming this video. This band-aid is necessary to keep the dirt out, but it does make tying a bit more difficult. I don't have the same dexterity as bare skin, which is making it difficult to tie this somewhat complicated fly. So excuse me bumbling around here, and you all should be able to do better on tying this fly than me. Once the tips are aligned, then measure out the fur. So the tips extend back about a hook gap width off the back of the hook. Transfer that measurement to your other hand, and then cut off the butt end square right at that measurement. Place the fur down so the butt ends are right up against the post, and the fur clump is directly on top of the hook shank. And then make a wrap and bind that down super tight. Make another couple very tight wraps to hold that into place. And then scoot your fingers back slightly, but continue to grasp the fibers, and make spiral wraps backwards down the hook shank. Now the tail will flare out if you bind down on the fiber at that last turn there. To stop this from happening, we need to make a couple loose wraps right behind that tight turn. For some reason I'm having trouble with this tail spinning a bit. So a dot of that super glue will help keep this into place, and will also help with the flare of the tail. Okay, now let's smooth out the body by making many wraps up and down the hook shank. Now we need some peacock hurl. Select 3 strands from the hank, and roughly align the tips, and then cut about 1 inch off the fragile tips. Now tie this in on the side of the fly, bringing your thread up to just past the hook point mark. Make touching wraps with the hurl, reaching about 1/4 of the way up the hook shank. And then tie in the hurl with a couple wraps, and then you can just break off the hurl. Bring your thread back over the hurl, making an even wrap to clean up any uneven spots. Now we will form an even base for the abdomen of this fly. by wrapping up the hook shank and back down with touching wraps, and try to get this as even as possible. Oh, and if your tail has any errant fibers, you can actually trim them off if you wish. Now, I probably should have done this earlier, but you can cut off the post excess to keep it from getting in your way. Just don't cut off too much. Now we need some floss. Pull off 3 to 4 turns of this and snip it off the bobbin. This should tie 4 to 5 of these flies. Tie this in on the side of the hook, ensuring it doesn't extend past the post, and then end with your thread another quarter of the way up the hook shank. To get the most even body, we need to flatten this floss out, so stroke out the floss between each wrap and make overlapping wraps with the floss. End when you reach your thread, and capture it with a couple wraps, before snipping off the waist. Now let's make a wing, and for that we need more of this deer hair. This time, however, we're snipping off quite a bit more, maybe 3 times or so more than what we did for the tail. For a clump this large, we do need a comb to get all the underfur and short fibers out. Put this clump in your stacker with the tips down, and give the stacker a few firm taps on your tying table. And then pull out the clump with your left hand. Now, I have a couple broken tips, and if you do also, it's a good idea to remove them. Measure out the wing to extend just shy of the tail, and then transfer that measurement to your other hand and cut off the butt end square. Rest this on top of the hook shank so the butt ends are right up against the post, and then make a wrap and bind down very tight. And then take a couple more tight wraps through the butt ends to keep the wing from spinning. Now this will flare out the wing quite a bit, so it's a good idea to make a couple loose wraps behind those tight wraps. This will help lay down that wing. And then end with your thread up past the post. Now we need some dry fly hackle, and here I have a bag of random saddle hackles in different sizes that I bought off eBay a long time ago. I pulled a couple that I've been using out of the bag, and you can see they're both brown, with a black stripe down the center. This is called a golden badger. You could also use a silver badger like this one. I mean, heck, use a grizzly if you want, or a regular brown. It really doesn't matter, I guess. But just make sure that the hackle is large enough. You can see here this is in the 12 to 10 size, which will work for this fly. It's always better to go a little bit larger than the hook size for a parachute hackle. Now, it can be tough to find saddles with size 10 hackle, but if you don't want to buy on eBay from some random sellers, like I did with this grab bag of hackle here, you can get some decently large hackle from a cape as well. Here's a whiting half cape that I have, and you can see that the feathers that are down towards the bottom of the cape tend to be larger, with longer hackle fibers, so this could be used. And of course, the ones towards the top of the cape are way too small for this fly. Okay, we need to prepare the feather for tie-in by stripping off about a ½ inch of fibers off the base, and then turn the feather around so the underside is facing you. Then strip off a couple more fibers on the far side like so. This will help to ensure that the fibers angle upwards slightly on the post, making it easier to whip finish at the end. Okay, tie in the feather by the tip and then tie back down towards the post. When you reach the post, wrap around the post and feather stem like so, and then work your way up the post with touching and tight wraps to create a sturdy post. Now you'll want to go up higher than you would think, as this needs to be a fairly tall post. When you're happy with the post height, then work your way back down the post with touching wraps. When you reach the bottom of the post, make one wrap over the post like so to position your thread for the next step. Now we need some rubber legs, and I really like these centipede legs from Montana Fly Company. I'm using the speckled tan in medium size today. Snip one off the hank, and then fold it over and cut it in half to make 2 legs. Take one of the halves and tie it in on the side of the fly right behind the post, so that the front part is angling downward and the back is upward slightly. And you'll want a little bit more length in the back of the leg than the front. Now, unfortunately, while tying these legs in, it's possible to flare out that wing, and it's really hard to lay it back down with thread wraps at this point. So if that happens to you, here's the trick. Solarez makes this UV resin that they call ultra thin. It comes with a handy paintbrush in the cap for easy application. So just paint a little on the wing while holding it down in position, and then grab your UV light and cure it hard. This will keep those wing fibers from flaring out, no matter what you do now. Turn the fly around and let's add the other leg to the other side, keeping that same angle. Now we need more Peacock hurl fibers prepared in the same way. Tie the tips in right at the legs. And then wrap around the post and rest your thread on the other side of the post like so. Now start wrapping the hurl around the head of the fly, but the first wrap should be under the rubber legs, to cover up the thread wraps made with tying in the wing. Make a couple wraps over the legs behind that post, and then jump in front of the post, pulling the legs out of the way. Also, make sure you don't trap your thread either. Keep making touching wraps until you reach the hook eye, and then wrap back down until you reach the post once again. At this point, you can bring your thread around and capture the hurl right on the post. And then trim off the waist. Now start wrapping the hackle around the post, and you can see how stripping off more on one side of the hackle helps to start the hackle so that the fibers angle upwards rather than down. Make at least 4 to 5 wraps with the hackle around the post, and more would be even better. Now you can see why it's important to have such a tall post. Trying to wrap around the other materials, especially the deer hair wing, is difficult. Also, that hurl takes up a bit of the post space. Once you get as many wraps of hackle in as you can, hold the hackle out and down with your left hand, and then wrap over it with the thread and around that post. Then pull everything down and make another wrap around the hackle before pulling the hackle up and wrapping under it. Now the hackle is secure, and hopefully with minimal trapped fibers, so it's time to snip off the waist. I like to whip finish right on the post, which isn't the easiest thing to do, but this ensures that you aren't wrapping over the hurl head to bring that thread up to the hook eye. A 3 to 4 turn whip finish is sufficient. Just try to trap as little amount of fibers as possible, and I'm sure you can do a better job at this than I did here. My bum finger was not making this easy, and it was actually quite painful to hold this whip finisher. Anyway, tighten your whip finish and snip off the thread. Now let's adjust and trim the legs to size. I like to cut the back legs to about the length of the tail, and the front legs to right about where the hackle ends. Also, it's a good idea to trim up any of the wing hairs that got pushed down into the body. I had quite a few on this side, but this will clean up the body and make it look a bit neater. Then we need to secure the whip finish with some head cement. For that, I will use the ultra thin resin. I apply this with the end of my bodkin for precise application under the hackle post, right on that whip finish knot. And don't forget to cure it with your UV light. Then I have a little trick to get those legs positioned how you want them. Add a drop right at the base of each leg, and then hold the legs in position where you want them and cure it. As you can see, the legs are not flared out as much. And there we go, the finished PMX. Not the easiest fly to tie, especially with part of the end of my thumb missing, but boy is this a great pattern. It's one of the highest floating, non-foam flies out there. The deer hair tail and wing mixed with that hackle post help keep this extremely buoyant. This can hold up the heaviest nymphs if you plan on fishing a dry dropper, and it will handle some of the roughest riffles out there. And the high post on this makes it extremely visible as well, so you will be able to detect even the most subtle takes. Now this is part of this month's stonefly dry fly series, and it mimics a stonefly very well. However, I really like fishing this as a hopper imitation also. I mean, pretty much all stonefly patterns also mimic a hopper, but this one especially, and you can tie it with different color underbodies if you want, even without that back portion of Peacock hurl, to mimic whatever color stoneflies or hoppers you want. Here is one with a yellow body, and one all black with orange body. As you can see, I didn't add the tuft of Peacock hurl on the back. But how beautiful are these royal PMXs though? All of these have such a great look underneath that perfectly resembles a stonefly or hopper. Now I am more than halfway to filling up this fly box, which I am filling with dry fly stoneflies. Last week I did the Madam X, and next week I plan on tying the chubby Chernobyl, probably the most popular stonefly dry to fish. So make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any future videos like this chubby Chernobyl. Oh, and if you were wondering, I do sell these fly boxes on Amazon with free shipping. They are thin enough to fit in most shirt pockets for quick runs to the water, or you can fit multiple in a chest pack and organize your boxes by fly type, like this stonefly box. The open compartments are great for holding dry flies and small midges. When fishing small midges, the magnets help keep the flies from falling out, and as you can see here, I'm turning the box upside down and all the flies stay put. I will link to my Amazon storefront below in the description section of this video if you're interested. Also, don't forget to check out my sponsor, Risen Fly. They made the hooks I use today, but they also make some of the best fly rods and reels for the money I have ever used. Best off, they're offering you all a discount. So if you're in the market for a new rod or a bunch of hooks or beads, go to www.risenfly.com and type in McFly at checkout, and they'll give you 15% off of your first order with them. Well, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.